This is Facility Rockstars, the podcast that celebrates the unsung heroes of our daily lives, facility professionals. I'm your host, Jay Culbert. Join me as we honor these great leaders, sharing stories, insights, and expertise that empower us all to learn and grow together. Facility Rockstars is sponsored by Coludus, operating the way you operate in order to make your life easier. Welcome back to Facility Rockstars. I'm your host, Jay Culbert. Today, we're tackling a critical area that impacts every organization: environment, health, and safety, or EH&S. We're going beyond the basics to explore the intricate relationship between EH&S and facilities management, and how fostering a strong safety culture through collaboration and genuine connection can lead to remarkable results. In this compilation episode, you'll hear from experienced professionals who share their professional insights, such as the power of truly listening to your workforce, to the paradigm shift of viewing EH&S not as regulators, but as facilitators and concierges. We'll delve into practical strategies for building robust relationships, understanding human and organizational performance complexities, and the increasing significance of environment, social, and governance ESG principles. Get ready to gain invaluable insights and actionable advice that can help you transform your approach to safety and operational excellence. Let's dive in. You've seen or heard a couple things on the show, and I'll always start with the first question, and that is this, especially with your extensive experience and knowledge, what's been your biggest lesson learned over the years?
I'd say being humble and listening to the workforce, listening to your coworkers, listening to the workforce, which leads me into where that leads me to is collaboration, just working together. And where I work in Windsor Locks for Collins Aerospace, I head up EH&S at the Windsor Locks facility. And one of our logo for our safety culture program in Windsor Locks is working together. So many years ago, I learned when I came to the site about the safety culture program in Windsor Locks and found out about the logo. And that's really what it represents, working together. And I've worked that way in my career, but it just really enhanced the way I look at things, learning from the team in Windsor Locks.
What would you want to share around the topic of safety with us?
So, my career, half of my career at least, has been tied to safety. Safety is all kinds of, management, policies, procedures. At the end of the day, safety is one of the highest percentages is the relational aspect of it. And demonstrating that you're in the field, caring for people, and having them understand that, sure, there are policies, there are procedures. Those policies and procedures were probably written because somebody else had sacrificed, unfortunately, to be able to end up in an area that was, in an uncomfortable or an injurious type of situation. So those policies and procedures are needed, but I think how they're delivered and the relational, like I said, the relational aspect and having that day in and day out communication with people so that they understand, we're here for you. We would like to proactively work safely with you. Is there anything we can review ahead of time to make sure that we're staying within the boundaries of policies and procedures so that we can put that aside? We're working to the context of the policies and procedures so that from there on, it's, decision-making 101. What is making these persons make certain decisions? With the policies and procedures there, if they still choose to deviate from those policies and procedures, then why is that? And the only way to learn that is to develop relationships with people. I talked about building relationships and partnerships earlier. Mm-hmm. I don't know that I could put a percentage on how much of safety is related to, relationships, but I can share with you that it seems a lot easier to have conversations one way or another, good or bad, with persons that you have a relationship with. They understand you're not just out there. We're not safety cops. I tell people the lights on my truck are yellow, just like the lights on your truck. They're yellow. They're not blue. They're not red. Um, we're here together. The persons that pay us for this type of work that we do are the same persons that are paying other persons in the organization. We're all pulling the rope the same exact way. We just happen to have, in my case, 3 states to cover and a little bit of offshore wind stuff. But the relational aspect, once again, of safety is, to me, a very high percentage. Knowing that we can trust each other, that we're going to be transparent in our communication with each other, and that if something is deviating from where we think it should be, based upon the math, the data, the science, then that's when we need to have those conversations and use that relationship, toward the betterment of everyone. I just want everyone to go home the same way that they started or better.
So I think the biggest topic that we kind of touched on recently was the fact that you're in an EH&S leadership role. And if you could speak about how you've kind of unpacked or understood the complexities of EH&S and facility management and how the two marry up with each other.
Yeah, so it's interesting. The department that I lead, we oversee safety as it relates to biomedical research, but also facilities, construction, contractors, et cetera. And I think holistically, the approach that I've tried to teach and also foster myself is one where we shift from gatekeepers to facilitators. We're trying to help streamline things and support facilities teams or researchers or whomever we're trying to support. The word that I commonly use is concierge. Concierge is someone who helps to make things get done, or to help, facilitate things getting done, and to make sure it's done smoothly with a good experience. And that's kind of how I like to see myself. I try to be a solution oriented partner to help enable facilities teams to achieve their goals efficiently and safely, which in turn fosters a safer and more harmonious work environment.
Makes sense. If I could roll back slightly, so kind of set the stage for what have you seen outside of how you practice EH&S and outside of how well you get along with facilities management? How does that, what made us land on this topic? Why was this relevant and important, Josh?
So early on in my career, I started to see that there was this clear divide between facilities and safety. It's fascinating. In the safety world, there's so much discussion about how whose safety should report to, and everybody says they should not report to facilities because there's always this divide, right? And I think it's actually a perceived divide, but it's a divide that's caused by the way some people operate. That's the way that I see it in my own head. Facilities personnel are usually people that are seen that are doing the job and getting things done and keeping things operating. And often safety people are seen as the people who are regulators, or as the, people like to call them the safety cops. And so that's my tagline is I'm not a cop, I'm a concierge.
Right.
And especially in my current role, when I started there early on, I saw that there was a major disconnect between the two. And so I immediately, the first thing that I did, and this is before I had some sort of framework in my head for how this could be done. I said, well, what have I been good at? This far in my career has been people. I may not know all the technical stuff. I know a good bit about it at this point, but I may not know it all. But what I do know is how to build relationships. And so I immediately started building relationships. And what did that mean for me? It meant having very simple conversations. Hey, how's your day going? What'd you do this weekend? In some instances, some people choose not to do this, but I used Facebook more than a way of posting silly things, I do post silly things, but instead of a way of looking to see what other people are into just for my, make myself feel better. I started connecting with people that I worked with so that I could simply learn a little something about them. Oh, their child plays basketball. Oh, they went to a soccer game over the weekend. These are their interests. And even if that's not somebody's cup of tea, finding out what somebody's interest is so you can even have a baseline conversation just to form those relationships. Because as soon as you form a relationship, you can start building that trust. You can start building that communication. Those are the two pillars of a relationship in the first place. And so I think that's the first step, is to have a relationship, and you can't have that if you're always butting heads, or if you have a combative approach to the way that you do work. And I think that's been a major problem with a lot of folks that I've experienced along my way, is that they see themselves as one thing, and when in reality they should be operating completely different.
How do we keep people all, say, rowing in the same direction, Joe? And what have you seen as potential challenges to that integration, and how do you get people back on board, if that makes sense?
Yeah, the biggest challenge, I think, through my career and through the companies I've worked with, is keeping people on the task of, let's focus on the prioritized items and on the risks at hand. And things are going to happen, right? Some accidents are going to come up, or facilities failure is going to come up that you didn't predict, or that you thought were a lower risk than what they occur. And I would say the biggest thing is to not dive all the resources and come off plan, right? You have to look at them, you have to do investigations, you have to figure out why they happened, but stay the course, work on your highest risk items first, and really try to avoid changing direction. It's hard with these big organizations when you're going and accomplishing manager system changes or risk reduction. It's very disruptive if you have these ones and twosies that pop up, and you turn the entire team to go take care of them. So that's what I would tell any listeners to avoid. Look at the statistics, the unstructured decisions. If you have one injury in a category and you have 15 injuries in another category, let's focus on the 15. Don't worry about the one unless it's a high hazard injury that occurred, right? But really staying calibrated to the mission of risk reduction.
And when you say try to avoid changing direction, would that example be what you just said? If there's 15 here and one there, then stay focused, stay on the mission.
Yeah, stay on the mission. Follow the data. Not to bring up or date you and I, but looking at back, what did Rudy Giuliani do in the city of New York when they had all the crime sprees? Right, he didn't go hire more police. He just focused the police where the crime was. So it's often sitting with the C-suite executives, and they say, well, what resources do you need? Well, everybody will say, hey, I'd like to have more resources. But the answer isn't always resources. It's, well, let's use our resources wisely. Let's put them towards where our risks are. Let's get them into key areas, and let's stop them working on the minutia, the things that don't add value.
With your wealth of experience and your vast knowledge in several different industries and disciplines, what's been your biggest lesson learned in your journey?
Well, I think one of the things is coming to the table, assuming everyone has that same baseline understanding that you do around, at least as it relates to my work, environment, health and safety, and compliance. When someone comes with a problem, or they're trying to implement something, whether it's a new piece of equipment or a new process, generally there is going to be some sort of EH&S impact. So when you're coming to the table to try to contribute in some way, but coming at it from the perspective of everyone must know what I know, because I've been around for a while, but I haven't been around that long. And then realizing that everyone has a unique skill set, everyone brings something else to the table. And I think it over the course of my career, understanding that nuance is important, especially in the facility space, dealing with a lot of facilities managers, as EH&S professionals do routinely. Giving them a little bit of the background as to whatever the regulation is, or the challenge from an environmental perspective or compliance permitting perspective. I find facilities staff, they like to understand more of the backstory instead of just being told no, or you can't do it this way. But once they're kind of brought along, and you share some of the background, now they understand what the new rules of engagement are, and they become a partner in it. So I think that's probably one of the biggest things over the course of.
Tom, very, very humble in the sense that it's not what you do, it's what the team's doing. How do you, what are some best practices that you've found to really work to support this throughout the years?
So one of the things that I have to do personally is I need to really try and keep it simple, and simplistic, so that I can understand it, but also needing to recognize that the simplicity needs to convey itself in a manner to others that don't know that type of business. The persons that are doing EH&S, that are doing health and safety, that are doing facilities engineering, they know what's in the pipe, why it's in the pipe, where it's going, etc. Whereas the persons that we're supporting may not have that same level of understanding. So simplicity, I think, becomes the key to, part of it. I do say that listening and being able to listen to the subject matter experts, if need be, to management, leadership, executive suite, persons, being able to listen, take advice from them, be patient when you're listening, and ensuring that you have that full understanding, I think will make a more efficient deliverable to whoever your endpoint customers may be. And then finally, when you talk about the different organizations, whether it be from the C-suite all the way down to a craftsperson or anybody that you might be working with, is building those relationships and understanding the partnerships, going back and forth. The relationships, I think, allow us to share with one another, what the expectations are from both sides, what our deliverables need to be, what can we deliver, when can we deliver it, and then making sure that relationally we're following back up and saying, hey, did we meet your expectations, everything that you were looking for? If not, what could we do different, better, faster next time that we have the same opportunity?
Can I jump back real quick to the simplicity point, Tom?
Sure.
So I'm wondering if you'd be willing to give an example or a couple of examples because of your depth of experience. I'm sure we have EH&S professionals listening. And is there any example you could give? I love what you said. So how could you frame that for really, and maybe it's just me, but a little further understanding, like an example, like any type of example?
Yeah. So I think one of the things that I think works well to try and simplify things is the development of either a sequence of events or process maps, so that when we're talking to one another about a certain situation, we could say, well, it was at this situation, this sequence of the events that it took place, and we missed this sequence, therefore this happened. Trying to, use a sports analogy, the X's, the O's, and putting them in perspective so that people understand, where each piece comes into play. I think that, is an example of the simplicity, using those process maps or a sequence of events to help us have an understanding of, hey, here's where we started. Here's point A. We were trying to get to point B. It didn't go in a straight line like everybody would efficiently hope it would. It took a little bit of a, circuitous route around there, but it was still a route that we got to B, and maybe we can be better next time. So that's just an easy, quick example of simplicity without being too tactile, instead of more of a strategic understanding of it.
Hey, rock stars! If you're tuning into the podcast and are feeling overwhelmed by all the maintenance demands at your facility, don't stress. We've got you covered. Our sponsor, Coludis, is your go-to partner to help you tackle all those demands and get them done right, on time, and with top-notch quality. From project planning to execution, Coludis is there to make hard work easy. Visit coludis.com today to get started. I'm excited to jump into the next topic that we've kind of dabbed on a couple of times here in our conversation, because it's come up in the past, but no one's ever really spoken in depth about human and organizational performance and the principles of it. And, you're a master at this, Matt. You walk it, you talk it, you breathe it. So I'd love to hear every perspective you'd like to share on this and the importance of it.
Yeah. At first, I wouldn't say I'm a master. I'm still learning. I've done a lot of research on it. I've been studying HOP, probably for coming up on 10 years now, and I really started implementing it when I came back to Windsor Locks to lead EH&S in 2018, and started finding some like-minded people and sharing with them the philosophy. So let me back up a little bit and tell you what the philosophy is.
Please.
Yes, really, it comes out of the nuclear industry, and it used to be called human performance. And then many years back, some other folks in the hop arena got a hold of it and said, "Hey, you know something? We're missing the organizational aspect of this." So they renamed it human and organizational performance. And I'll continue to call it hop moving forward, so we don't have to keep saying that.
Sure. Sure.
But it's a philosophy. It's not a program. I'm not selling you a program. It's a way of thinking. Hop is really essentially about understanding the context and conditions of work, the complexities that we work in every day. And like I said, it's an operating philosophy to give us a framework for building more resilient organizations. So by using these 5 principles, that's part of the philosophy, which I'm going to run through quickly here. So in Windsor Locks, we already had a strong cult. Like I said, I've mentioned safety culture many times here in the conversation already. We had a strong culture program, but it started to plateau. And then so when I came back, I brought in this hop philosophy, and it really kind of rejuvenated us. And one of the programs that it made a huge difference in is the contractor program.
Okay.
And some of the first people to get involved with me were folks in the contractor program and in our facilities department that really latched onto it.
Call it EHS and facilities. There is that back and forth at times, and not necessarily a negative one, but could you touch a little bit more on how you solved for that? I think you just did with the overall, but is there anything more to say with that?
I mean, I think I spent a lot of time with the teams and all the leaders, and they're all equal, right? So my direct leadership team, there's the head of director of EH&S and director of capital projects and all that stuff. So they're all equals. We discuss, their talent. We discuss our challenges. We discuss possible synergies. We all prioritize, capital, operating expense allocations in our annual operating plan. And we all, I think, listen to one another respectfully, and we all appreciate one another and what we're trying to achieve. And certainly I've have, individual discussions with my leadership team about how that any of that infighting or challenges will not be accepted. And to be fair, when I first took over all of the scope, going back, I don't know, 12, 13 years ago, when it fully all bolted together, I had to, I'm going to be politically correct here. I had to move some people out of the organization. Okay. Simply because it wasn't that they weren't super smart in their space, but they weren't willing to get along with others for the greater good. And I just will not tolerate that. So, yeah.
Excellent. Earlier, you mentioned ESG, and I wanted to jump back to that too, because, maybe people may not know what you mean by that, and could you just speak to that, what the acronym means and how it shows up in your world?
Yep, sure. Yeah, and I'll touch on it. It is pretty vast. So ESG, environment, social governance, which used to be corporate social responsibility, which started back in the day of just, companies going out communities and green teams and things like that. Now, this is become real important to large corporations like us. For instance, investors, tenders, our sales teams, countries that we do business in are all requiring us to define our ESG strategy. And E is probably what a lot of people in the audience would understand. It's all around like your carbon footprint and your waste of your products and processes and things like that. S is on, diversity, equity, inclusion. Do you have any slave labor in your supply chain? And governance is really on how you're structured and how you govern all of this stuff. But, my team mainly focuses on predominantly on the E and a little bit on the S. But I was one of the founders of ESG at Boston Scientific back in 2014. We've since hired a VP of ESG, and it's just grown astronomically. But it is super critical. It's now our report as far as what we do in ESG is tied to our financial report. On Investor Day, it's a huge question that comes up. And now we're even seeing, as I mentioned, regulations coming forth. So there's all these directives that I won't go into on this call, CSRD in Europe, and all these types of things that are coming out from a regulatory compliance standpoint that we've literally hired on my team carbon accountants, and we are hiring professionals that just support this space. And it gets into renewables and power purchase agreements and solar and virtual power purchase agreement, and that's like a whole other podcast. But ESG has become a big part of my world, and it crosses all of my centers of excellence and all of my scope. So
we'll always look for the audience to hear the nuggets of the best practices. And I know you've already given many. Would you have any others from a day-to-day, week-to-week, annual basis that you'd recommend as best practice or advice around this topic?
We do managerial safety visits. So we go out on the floor, have these conversations. We're talking about what challenges. And the big thing, the best practice, I think, from that program is that we have commitments when we leave those conversations. We have commitments where the worker commits to do something, and we as leaders commit to do something, and we stand on that. So we track that on our Plus QDCI boards, and we make sure we go back and visit that the actions, the actions are done and that they're meaningful for that work area. And I think Matt talked about it a little bit, but really the biggest thing for HSE professionals, facilities professionals, leaders that are listening to your call is also the alignment with quality, safety, operations. Like, there's no reason to do these programs separately. They should be one. There's absolutely no reason to have just a safety walk or just a quality walk. Or you're going out to look at your system, and that system involves quality, production, safety, facilities, all these different topics. And it shouldn't just be narrow focused on just safety every time.
Anything more on the safety and facility manager, FM role at all?
I mean, I think part of it is that make yourself available to also do favors for others. In that, as safety people, we're asking for things constantly. Hey, I need you to do this. I need you to put your safety glasses on. I need you to wear a welding helmet. I need you to, use fall protection and things like that. I think you need to figure out ways to make it so that they can lean on you for things. And so then it shows that it is, like I was talking about relationships being reciprocal. You got to give and receive in order for a relationship to be successful. So I think that's the other thing is don't be the one that's always asking for something. Be the one that's also giving something that's of need for the other person.
That's great psychology right there. And I'm going to put you on the spot and ask, is there any examples you can think of? Because that's like what would the audience might be wondering, okay, well, what could EH&S, what could safety do for me? Because you're right, it is. Get those safety glasses on. Why isn't your respirator? Where are the steel toe shoes or protective shoes? What are some ways you could shift that seesaw, that balance a bit, or maybe the ways you have?
I mean, start simple. When I first started doing this and I would show up with our facilities personnel to have conversations with them, and I was just having conversations. I wasn't doing any training or anything of the sort. I showed up with donuts. I mean, this is very simple. It's something that we can all do. But, somebody that's coming off an overnight shift and is about to get off at 6 a.m. and you show up at 5:30 with some donuts, they're usually pretty appreciative. But right away, you're showing that, oh man, they did something for me. And I wasn't even asking for anything yet.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I hadn't even asked for anything. I started off with giving something. And then I started asking for things. But we work together. I think the other thing is that making sure you're involving the other party in the decisions. Hey, we need to start wearing fall protection. Can I bring a vendor in and have them demo some for you, and you see what's most comfortable, what you like the best, and then I'll buy it for you. I think it's the very simple things like that as involving the others so that when the decision's made, there's actually buy-in if they've been involved throughout the process.
Let's play that out if we could, because I think the audience would definitely, I know I'll benefit from it as well as our listeners. So when you said pre-work with contractors, I do want to jump into that, but I kind of preface it by saying it sounds like you've bridged the, facilities being tasked to get something done quickly and on time, and EH&S saying, whoa, let's slow down a bit here. Let's figure this out. How do we do it safely and be in compliance? So when you do a contractor pre-work, I think you called it, right? So how does that work, and is that where that starts?
Yeah, and Windsor Locks, I'm gonna bounce around a little bit here. In Windsor Locks, I mentioned our safety culture program and culture and organizational culture, and part of that, before I jump into the pre-work, we have another tool that we use in Windsor Locks for employee empowerment called the RIDI program, which is called Report It, Don't Ignore It. And I tell many folks all the time that the RIDI program is one of our biggest culture drivers in Windsor Locks because it's employee empowerment. They can raise their hand, report, and it's basically a hazard and near miss reporting system.
Hmm.
Say something, you see something, say something. And in our union, we had some grassroots safety teams came up with that term back in 2003 called "Report It, Don't Ignore It." So
Hmm.
that drives our safety program, a big part of it. But then the pre-work with contractors kind of is the same symbol. It's another one that everybody always talks about in our contractor program. Do you have your pre-work? Did you have dialogue around the pre-work? Did you do
Mhm.
job planning? So the pre-work is really our risk assessment tool. We also sometimes we use the term called JHA on the fly, job hazard assessment on the fly, because you're on the fly planning a job. It, but it's the pre-work drives the contractor program and drives dialogue between EH&S, operations, project managers, and the contractors and facilities.
Who calls those meetings? Is it your team? Well, it's all kind of one team, but who organizes all of that, right?
Yeah, it really starts with our project managers.
Okay.
We'll have them in place with our maintenance team too, but there's not as many pre-works there. But on the contractor program side, it really starts with the project managers working with a contractor that's supporting a job. They know that they got to put the pre-work in place. And that also drives some other permits that we have in place for, say, overhead work permit or confined space permits. It
Mhm.
all starts there with the pre-work. So the project managers with the contractor will start that and then bring in my EH&S team as needed to have those discussions and work through that. But
Sounds
it's
like
really driven by facilities and the project management team.
excellent process. Excellent process put in
Yeah,
place.
it drives that culture for that contractor program. I can't say it enough. How our RIDI program drives the employee culture. That's the tool that drives the pre-work's the tool that drives the culture in the contractor program on
Hmm.
focus on safety. And
Hmm.
there's another term that I've started using in Windsor Locks, a philosophy that we're trying to push too is mission first, safety always. And I picked this up from some military folks. We always say safety first, but that's not really what happens when the folks get out in the field.
Hmm.
They're dealing with multiple aspects of things going on, multiple tasks, multiple priorities. Safety starts off being number one priority, but then as you get in the field, you uncover all kinds of complexity going on in the workplace or the field work or wherever you are.
Mm-hmm.
So what we started saying is it doesn't really do us justice in the EH&S field saying safety first. It doesn't really have a great, I know we've always said that and it drives that culture. But what I'm trying to say is really we're after the mission. Get the
To
job
understand
done.
the details first.
Correct. Get the
Yeah.
mission, focus on the mission, the details of the mission, but also be safe always.
Well, we spoke briefly, and I think you brought a really good topic up in our conversation, and that's cross-functional groups and how
Mhm.
there are all sorts of organizations and events and activities and groups that we can join. And I don't know if we talked about like herds staying together. You didn't use those
Yeah.
words; those are mine. But
Yeah.
can you expand on that? What you meant by cross-functional and the benefit of that?
Yeah, absolutely. Some of the greatest mentors I've had, things that I've learned were from professionals that were not within the EHS space. Just like I'm sure, some of your facilities colleagues would say the same. There are every professional or every profession has a group, a consensus group, or whatever that might be. Two of the big ones that I've been actively involved in over the years. One is the American Industrial Hygiene Association, and the other is the Board of Certified Safety Professionals. And each one of those also has local chapters, so you can kind of get together and commiserate with your colleagues at other companies that dabble within the EHS space. But then over the years, I've participated in other meetings like with the ISPE, as a result of interacting with some engineers in different pharma spaces. And you definitely, for one, you build your network instantly and exponentially as a result of going to these other professional groups outside of your own. And you learn things and you get a better understanding of how others think and their perspectives, because you're seeing their siloed organization and they all have their similar thoughts and group think and all that, and just like us in the EHS space. So jumping at those opportunities to cross that divide and go to some of those other groups and learn about some of the things that are interesting and, new technologies or new challenges that one professional group is dealing with. It only betters you, I think.
Now, is that just something that's always been in your DNA? Are you just have a thirst for knowledge or learning
Yeah,
different?
you said it. You said it early on. I'm kind of a big deal. So yeah, yeah. I mean, I think as I've gotten farther in my career, it's less about the destination, and it is more about the ride along the way. And it is nice to learn new things, especially as you've been in one profession for a while, and it's nice to mix it up and learn something else.
And that wraps up our insightful compilation of environment, health, and safety. We've covered a lot of ground today, hearing diverse perspectives on how to navigate the complexities of EH&S while fostering a thriving safety culture. A huge thank you to all of our contributors for sharing their wealth of experience. Some key takeaways from today's episode include the foundational importance of humility and actively listening to every member of your team. We heard about the undeniable strength of collaboration and the working together mindset, as well as the impact of shifting from a safety cop to a concierge approach focused on facilitating solutions. Building trust and strong relationships is paramount, as it is maintaining a laser focus on prioritized risks and data-driven decision-making. It's also crucial to recognize the unique skills each individual brings to the table and the value of sharing knowledge openly. Simplicity in communication can be incredibly powerful, and understanding principles like human and organizational performance can truly elevate your safety programs. We also touched on the growing imperative of ESG, the practical benefits of managerial safety visits with clear commitments, and the wisdom in making relationships reciprocal. Powerful strategies like contractor pre-work and employee empowerment initiatives such as report it, don't ignore it, can make a tangible difference, all while keeping the philosophy of mission first, safety always at the forefront. Finally, don't underestimate the power of stepping outside your immediate silo and engaging with cross-functional groups for continuous learning and a broader perspective. Thanks as always for tuning into Facility Rockstars. If you found today's episode valuable, if you laughed, if you learned something, please subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with your colleagues. We'll talk to everybody next week. It's a wrap. Another episode of Facility Rockstars is in the books. Facility Rockstars is sponsored by Colutus, operating the way you operate in order to make your life easier. Until next time, facilitate and rock on.